I'm Edward Leigh. I am the Conservative candidate for the Gainsborough constituency, which is the West Lindsey district of Lincolnshire, and I've been the MP for 41 years. Well, my local connection to the area is that I've lived here for 41 years and very happy. And I'm speaking from my home in Lincolnshire now. And I've been very happy to be the MP here for all that time and living here as well. Well, I think we've achieved a lot for Gainsborough and for the whole constituency, really. Gainsborough is part of the West Lindsey district. I think when I arrived in 1983, Gainsborough was quite run down. It had been really an industrial town, heavily reliant on two employers, Roses and Marshalls. And they both sort of got into some difficulties. Although when I arrived, they were still employing people, they were still working as factories. But since then, we've developed the whole of Marshall's Yard in Gainsborough. And which I think is a great plus, and what I'm really proud of is that I persuaded Michael Gove, the Secretary of State for Levelling Up, recently to give £10 million in levelling up money, and we're going to get a new cinema in Gainsborough. And if you walk around Gainsborough, you'll see there's a lot of tidying up and repair of old Georgian houses. And so I think that the whole town is on the up now. And if there's a Conservative government, Michael Gove has promised me, we're going to get another £20 million of levelling up money. Well, the biggest local issue in this constituency, and I've got to think about the constituency-wide issues, quite frankly, for the last 2 years, has been the future of RAF Scampton, which is only sort of 20 miles from Gainsborough. So it is a local issue. And we've been fighting the Home Office for 2 years now on their plans to put 2,000 migrants there and to stop any regeneration for 3 years. And we've won that battle. So there's now going to be a reasonable deal made between West Lindsey and between the Home Office, which will ensure that 90% of the site is released immediately for regeneration. So that's been the main battle that we've been fighting for over the last 2 years. Yes. And also ringing Gainsborough are very large numbers of applications for solar farms. I'm not against solar farms, but they're amounting to 10,000 acres in an area around Gainsborough. And it's just far too much. We rely on Lincolnshire to produce our food, and they bypass West Lindsey District Council by claiming their national infrastructure projects. So I think the solar farm issue, we're all in favour of solar farms, but not 10,000 acres around one small town. I think people are interested. For instance, there's one issue in Market Raisin, which I haven't mentioned. It's not specific to Gainsborough, but we've been battling for years to get the through train from Grimsby down through Market Raisin to Lincoln and on to London. And we're still battling with LNER, who claim they now have to extend the platform, build a bridge, get disabled access, raise the platform. So that's an ongoing battle. That's been the main battle around the town of Market Raisin recently. Well, yes, we're constantly battling. I mean, I've done a lot of work on flooding, particularly around Short Ferry, around Fiskerton, helping farmers like Henry Ward, trying to get a better deal with the Environment Agency. But apart from that, of course, there are always rural issues. I mean, there's still rural poverty. There is a lack of services. In many ways, we're very blessed with good schools here. We have 2 excellent grammar schools in Gainsborough and in Caister. There's also a grammar school in Horncastle, which I used to represent in Parliament. And we have very excellent, good comprehensive schools. William Farr has been a leader in that in Welton. So education is an important issue. Transport is an important issue. But of course, otherwise, people are concerned, as they are everywhere in the country, with the national issues, cost of living, the war in Ukraine, the pandemic. All these sort of issues are of acute importance to people. Well, it all rather depends, doesn't it, on who forms the government. Obviously, I'm a Conservative candidate. I hope there'll be a Conservative government. If there's a Labour government, we'll have to hold them account in opposition. I think that whoever is in the government is going to have a very difficult time. People should always remember that we've had to cope with huge shocks to the system. The first war in Europe since 1945 in Ukraine, the pandemic, where we had to furlough millions of people. So the next government is going to have a very difficult time. And I suppose if it's a Conservative government, I'll be held to account. If it's a Labour government, I'll hold them to account. Well, I think we've got a tremendous problem in this country with housing. I mean, housing is easier in Lincolnshire than it is in the south of England, where it's sort of almost completely unaffordable. We still have very affordable, lovely starter homes in Gainsborough, and they're much more affordable than they are in many parts of the country. But as everybody agrees, we've got to build many more houses. And at the same time, we have to cut net migration. And I've been a powerful voice in Parliament, constantly arguing that we should not have these huge levels of net legal migration, let alone illegal migration, which there's just too much strain on services. The population is increasing by too much, and that means that young people find it increasingly difficult to buy their home or even to rent their home. That's a major issue with young people. I hope that they're quite pleased that despite the fact we had to put up taxes to cope with the war and the cost of living crisis and the dramatic increase in energy prices, the pandemic, everything else, national insurance is now coming down. I mean, that's why Rishi Sunak has cut national insurance, and that's why he wants to cut it more, because national insurance is a tax specifically on working people. So that's a major part of our manifesto. Well, I'm a family man. I've got 6 children. Well, we've got plans for child benefit as well, so that people aren't penalised. I think we have to support families, whatever sort of families they are. It's very tough bringing up a family, but I think politicians sometimes talk in too easy terms about this, where everybody's pro-family, but families are individuals as well, and we have to support families, individuals, and try and get people back into work, tax less, feel more wanted, well educated, and they affect everybody. I think we've got a very good record on pensioners with the triple lock. The state pension is much more generous now than it was 14 years ago. It's now got the quadruple lock, which will ensure that the state pension is never taxed. Obviously, it's tough being a pensioner, but many pensioners, of course, have occupational pensions as well. And that's why we've got to reduce the overall level of taxation, because they're paying more tax. They're being dragged into higher rates of tax. So you've got to have a government that is committed to trying to reduce tax. It doesn't think you can solve all your problems by taxing people more. I think it's very difficult. We've done our best to support Ukraine. The trouble is that Russia is a very powerful country. They have inexhaustible reserves of men. It's an authoritarian government. It's not a democracy. I think they're going to keep going and going. It's going to go. I think it's going to be an everlasting war, I'm afraid. But we can't allow Ukraine to be completely submerged by its very powerful neighbor. So we'll have to go on supporting them at a cost. But I don't think that we're going to get a victory anytime soon. And I've warned again and again in Parliament that this is very, very difficult. There is no easy way out of this. I suppose, like all wars, it'll end up in some sort of negotiation, so nobody will be happy. And people will argue that Putin is being rewarded for his aggression. But I suspect that in the long term, that will happen. Then I think it's very difficult. I support Israel's right to fight back and defend its people. There was a pogrom on the October 7th, but equally it's got to be in proportion. And I also support the right of the Palestinian people to live in peace, particularly in the West Bank. And we've got to stop more and more Jewish settlers coming into the West Bank. The whole thing has to be stabilized with a peace deal, which releases the hostages, stops the war, stops new settlements in the West Bank. I mean, this is a virtually impossible problem to solve, And I feel sorry for anybody like President Biden who has to deal with it. He's probably the only person who has real influence. I doubt if we, the British or the French or the Germans, have much influence in this. We are minor players, but we do have some small role. Well, I know it's not the question, but it's obvious that the best politician that we've produced in my political lifetime has been Mrs. Thatcher. But actually, I know a lot of people may not agree with this, but I quite actually admire our present Prime Minister. I think he's very moral, hardworking, decent, sensible. He's doing his best in a very difficult situation. I quite admire him, actually, to be honest. Well, I know it's not the question, but it's obvious that the best politician that we've produced in my political lifetime has been Mrs. Thatcher. But actually, I know a lot of people may not agree with this, but I quite actually admire our present Prime Minister. I think he's very moral, hardworking, decent, sensible. He's doing his best in a very difficult situation. I quite admire him, actually, to be honest.
So,
and of course, I admire people who are not involved in politics at all. I like sailing. I admire Robin Knox Johnson, who was the first person to sail non-stop, single-handed around the world. Oh, don't. I can't think of a joke offhand. I'm sorry, don't go there. I probably would think of it in the 5-10 minutes, but I can't think of one now. Sorry. The motto in life is nil desperandum, never despair, keep going, never give up.
Right. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.